Recording in progress.
In the Haggadah we say what is about the Dalet Banim, and we say, what does the Chacham say? What's the Chacham's question or issues that he has? So he says, what are the edus? What are the chukim? What are the mishpatim? Edus are ceremonial mitzvahs. Chukim are super rational mitzvahs. Mishpatim are laws that are rational laws that Hashem commanded you. And the response to the Ben Chacham is, you should say to your son, we were servants or slaves to Pari Mitzrayim, and Hashem took us out of the land of Mitzrayim with a mighty hand. And the answer to the Ben Chacham concludes, and Hashem commanded us all these chukim to fear and to be in awe of Hashem our God. And the previous Rebbe analyzes this in a maimer that he said 30 years prior. In other words, in Tuf Shin in 1940, as opposed to 1970 when this maimer was said. The Tzarech L'Havim, the Friedrich Rebbe, asks that we need to understand, since he is a Chacham, by Torah standards, he's called a Chacham. It's not just people are calling him a Chacham. Because he's called a Chacham in the oral Torah, both in the Mechilta, where this the original Maimer Chazal that's from, and in the Haggadah, they call him a Ben Chacham. So therefore, if Torah proclaims him to be a Chacham, so he's really a Chacham. If so, we need to understand, how does such a question fit for a Chacham? What's his question? What are these ceremonial mitzvahs and decrees? Are they a Chacham? If he's a Chacham, he surely knows all of these things. He knows the different mitzvahs and so on. By the way, if I remember correctly, the Rebbe mentioned this in the Haggadah. When we talk about Ben Chacham, Ben Rasha, it doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about a 5-year-old. We picture, there's the little children sitting by the Seder table, and one is wise, and one is this, and one is that. No. Ben Chacham is like, if I remember correctly, the Rebbe used the term like Ben Chorim. Ben, or Bar Mitzvah, which also means Ben. It means one who is a Chacham. Ben Adam. These are terms that doesn't mean a little child. So if he's not a child, he's a Chacham. So he knows all these Eidos Chukim Mishpatim. What's he asking? We also need to understand what we are responding to the Ben Chacham that we were slaves to Pari Mitzrayim. Since he's called a Chacham, he surely knows the story of the Yidden being a Mitzrayim. What is the great chiddush that we're bringing him? What's the novelty that we're bringing him by this response? Though this response includes not just the story, but it's actually, the response is a shortened version of a response that includes all matters of Pesach, like it's explained in the commentaries in the Haggadah, in the explanation of the continuation of the part of the Haggadah that says Chacham. What does he say? So at the end of that it says, Va'af ata emar lo yichulu, and also you tell them, Ein maftirim achar Pesach afikoyim. After the Korban Pesach, we do not eat any dessert, we do not eat any other food. Meaning, what is this trying to tell us? What about everything else? This is indicating to us that everything until the final law of Afikoyim is told him. In addition to what it says in the Parsha, that it says in the Parsha that we were slaves. That's already brought earlier in the Haggadah. That's not the only thing we tell the Ben Chacham. And we tell them also all the rest of the Haggadah, halachos of Pesach. In addition to Avodim Hayinu, tell them the halachos of Pesach. But we're not just picking one halacha, But you should say all the halachas ad hadavar ha'achron sheba, until the final halacha that has to do with Karban Pesach, shu ein maftir mecholo, that we do not eat anything else after the Karban Pesach. So it's not just about the afikoimon, not eating it after Karban Pesach, Mekol Makom still and all. Liyosef ben Chacham, since he's a wise son, Bevadi doing like calling Yanamelu. So again, we're talking about a ben Chacham, so surely he knows all the halachas. So just like he knows about Avodah Me'inu Lefarim Mitzrayim, and there's no need to tell it to him, the same thing, there's no need to tell him the halachas of the Karban Pesach and the Pesach night. Top of page Vav Ma'u Chiddush B'mayna. What is the novelty and uniqueness in this response that we are telling to the Ben Chacham? That is one question the Frierdiker Rebbe asks. Also, he analyzes what it says. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim and he commanded us to do all the chukim. The mashma, it seems to indicate, since Hashem took us out of the land of Mitzrayim, that's why he commanded us to do all the chukim. Seemingly, what is the connection and association between that he took us out of Mitzrayim to do all the chukim? In other words, there's a lot of mitzvahs which seemingly do not reflect and do not have any commemoration with going out of Mitzrayim. Para Aduma has to do with the fact we went out of Mitzrayim. Not wearing shatnez has to do with us not going out of Mitzrayim. Yes, there are many mitzvahs that were established. Remember, Hashem took you out of the land of Mitzrayim, and therefore you should do such and such. But not every mitzvah, kol hachukim, do not have to do, or the chukim in general do not have to do with going out of Mitzrayim. So the Rebbe analyzes what the Frierdiker Rebbe's question is on a deeper level. So he says in line 6, we could explain the exact idea that he's trying to say. The lechura, seemingly, the going out and being taken out from servitude of Mitzrayim. It makes sense that should be a reason why we should fulfill mitzvahs that are logical. These are mitzvahs that intellect and rational thought tells us we should do it. Even the testimonial, ceremonial mitzvahs, commemorative mitzvahs, also makes sense that going out of Mitzrayim should lead us to that. Though intellect on its own, rational thought on its own, would not obligate us to make ceremonial mitzvahs and commemorative mitzvahs, Mekol Makom still in all, Gama Seichel, maybe Shetzarach Lasa Seichel L'Mura, but Seichel agrees, once those mitzvahs have been established, that you should make some type of commemoration for an event. So it makes sense to have those type of mitzvahs as well. Mashenke chukim, as opposed to chukim, decrees, Sheva Mitzvah, Shem L'Makom B'Seichel Klal, they have no room and place in rational reason whatsoever, which is a type of avodah shuinam siris nefesh shalamayla maseichel. That's the idea of self-sacrifice that's beyond intellect, because a person willing to give up his life for Hashem is also indicative of something that is beyond reason. Why would a person give up his life? So, and therefore, since Mesiras Nefesh is one of those things that's beyond reason, it makes no sense that because Hashem took us out of slavery, therefore we should be willing to give up our lives for Him. It doesn't mesh. Why? Line 14, being taken out of slavery, only obligates us to do things that are lower than slavery. If I help out a person and I got him out of prison, so then you owe me to pay me back something, at least something that is less than what it would take out of you to be a prisoner. Or at least it would make you pay back something to me that's equal to servitude. In other words, I took you out of servitude, I took you out of enslavement. So now, like I own you now. You are now my slave because I took you out of slavery. But that's as far as one may consider the obligation on the person that was taken out of slavery towards the person that took him out of slavery. As he says in line 16, but this doesn't obligate the person that was saved from slavery in having self-sacrifice, being willing to give up his life for the person that took him out of slavery. That's beyond just being enslaved, because if you're enslaved, you at least have your life. In general, in a healthy individual, they will not give up their lives. We're not talking about risk giving up their lives, but literally giving up their lives to leave slavery. So you can't say that the person that is being taken out of slavery is now committed to self-sacrifice for Hashem because he took him out of slavery. It's not a quid pro quo. If so, what does the pasuk say? Since Hashem took us out of the land of Mitzrayim, that's why Hashem commanded us to do all these chukim chukim that are beyond reason. That's a general idea of self-sacrifice. Now the Rebbe says about self-sacrifice, he goes into, if you will, a sidebar about what is this idea that a person has an obligation to self-sacrifice for Hashem. Though in Torah it doesn't say a reason for Mesiras Nefesh, like many Mamar Chassidus point out, the idea of giving up one's life for Hashem is written in the Torah. It's a Torah obligation. Like we learn out either from where it says, you shall love Hashem with all your soul, or meaning all your life, that a person is obligated to give up their lives for Hashem. That's one of the meanings in loving Hashem, b'chol nafshecha. Or there's a different pasuk that teaches us about this. Or from what it says, that will become sanctified amongst the Bnei Yisrael, that as we know, self-sacrifice is called sanctification of Hashem's name, the idea of Kiddush Hashem. So therefore, we have a Torah obligation to do so. So how do we have such an obligation? Because Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. What's the connection between them? How does being taken out of slavery make it incumbent upon us to go even further and be willing to give up our lives for Hashem? Another question that Rebbe brings down, another thing that Friedrich Rebbe analyzes over there, what does he say, top of page Zayin? That the command is to do all these statutes so that we should fear Hashem. Isn't love a much greater avodah than yira, than awe of Hashem, than fear of Hashem? Like it's brought down the Zoyar, less pulchana, there's no service like the service of love. So why does it say that Hashem gave us all these chukim, or for the sake of fearing Him, should be even greater things? So we should love Him. His base. The Maimer, and the Maimer explains Shilas ben Chacham, what the question is of the wise son. That what's the question? What are these Eidus Chukim Mishpatim that Hashem commanded you? Shesheilosai eina al klolus inyan Torah haTorah mitzvahs Eidus Chukim Mishpatim. His question is not on the general idea of Torah mitzvahs. What are these Eidus? What are these Chukim? What are these Mishpatim? Shari Kairim Oisai ben Chacham. We're calling him a wise son. He knows the idea of Torah and its mitzvahs and all the details of its matters. Rather, his question is, how do we draw down the revelation of the Ein Sof through mitzvahs in action? That is the question. V'zeu toichen inyan she'ilosei ma edis v'achukim v'mishpatim asher tziva avay l'keinu eschem. The question is not what are the mitzvahs. What are the mitzvahs that I commanded you? Eschem, what's the emphasis? You, Ritzoyne loymar, he means to say, Atem, you. The ein ha'avoida shalachem k'moy ha'avoida the others. That you Klal Yisrael, your avoida is not like the avoida of the others. Shahois ha'avidosam b'mesiris nefesh u'binyanim ruchnim. The avoida of the others was in the idea of self-sacrifice and in spiritual matters. And that type of avoida makes sense to the Ben Chacham. Aval atem, but you, shavoida shalachem hirak b'asiv apoil mamish, that your avoida is only an action, an actuality, like we learned in yesterday's Tanya, that the action is the most important. How is it possible that you're going to draw down such amshacha of the Ein Sof when it's not about the spiritual, it's not about the emotional, it's not about the self-sacrifice, it's about doing mitzvahs in action, which is the chiddush of the Eidus Chukim V'Shpatim of Eschem, of you, as opposed to the others. So now he's going to explain this more by going into the difference in how the others fulfilled mitzvahs versus how we fulfill the mitzvahs. Line 19, the idea behind this is, the אומר Azal Chazal said, "Avos kimu kol Torah kulach le'nitna." The Avos fulfilled the entire Torah before it was even given. But this was done in the spiritual sense. What does it mean they fulfilled it in the spiritual sense? Like we're soon going to explain, they didn't actually put on physical tefillin. My mitzvah tefillin, like for example, the mitzvah of tefillin shemakshe b'Torah, he asks in Torah, Avram tefillin asher niskar sham Yitzias Mitzrayim. Had Avram put tefillin that's mentioned over there, Yitzias Mitzrayim was adayin lo klal gos Mitzrayim. There was no exile in Mitzrayim, so how could it talk about an event? It would be a lie. He would be putting on his hand something that would be attesting to a future event, and therefore it's a lie. And the Alter Rebbe explains in Torah that he didn't actually put on tefillin with Dalet Parshas written in it, but Shakim Shaloi Hoibe Pnimius Hainu Baruchnius. His fulfillment was in the inner level, meaning he connected with the inner level of what tefillin is about. He did it only in the spiritual realms. He didn't fulfill a physical mitzvah of putting Dalet Parshas in boxes and placing them on his head and on his arm. So the Rebbe is going to challenge himself by saying, we do see that the Avos did physical actions in regards to mitzvahs. It wasn't totally spiritual. Though we find, the Zohar explains, that when Yaakov Avinu was carving out the different sticks to place in front of the animals when they were drinking, he was accomplishing with that particular action the same thing that we accomplish now in the spiritual realms and when we put on tefillin. So seemingly, even the others had the tefillin in the physical. So why would the Ben Chacham ask, how do our mitzvahs that are primarily physical draw down the Ein Sof, as opposed to the Avos' mitzvahs that were spiritual? The Avos' mitzvahs were also physical, like we see when Yaakov Avinu fulfilled the mitzvah of tefillin through the maklos, through the sticks that he carved out. So the Rebbe says it wasn't about the physical. There was no sanctity with the sticks that Yaakov Avinu carved out. It wasn't, in other words, he was still fulfilling it in the spiritual realm. If he was fulfilling it in the physical realm, so then, just like tefillin are holy objects and they must be treated in a certain way, the same thing, the sticks would have been holy and would have to be treated in a certain ways. They weren't. Move on from this is understood. The primary avoida, even by Yaakov Avinu, accomplishing the spiritual realms, the Hanachas Tefillin, was not a physical avoida of the maklos. It was primarily in the spiritual. Ilu hal bosha begashmi is top of page ches. So if so, what was this whole idea of using what he's calling in clothing in the physical? Why was there actual physical sticks that were used. It was just a matter of a sign. It was only for a hint. It wasn't that actually the mitzvah was being done in such a type of way, that the physical was connected in it. And because it was only a sign and a hint for what's going on in the spiritual realms, that's why when Yaakov used the maklis, he carved out the sticks in lieu of mitzvahs of tefillin. The sticks did not become holy because they were only a symbol of something. It wasn't that the actual mitzvah had to do with the physical. That is all the mitzvahs of the others that were all in the spiritual realms. On the mitzvah shalach matan Torah, but the mitzvahs following the giving of a Torah, ikar in yonam hu ma'aser poel begashmis. Their main idea is in the physical action in the physical world. V'dafkai deizeh mamshichim gilu ein sof. And through that, we draw down the revelation of the Ein Sof. As we mentioned again in yesterday's chitas, that it's only mitzvahs begashmis that do it. And the only need for intention is only for the completion and perfection of bir inyan, and explaining the matter. Therefore, fulfilled the mitzvah in action, and he didn't have an intention of the spiritual meaning of the mitzvahs and so on. Yotzi fulfilled obligation because it's all about the physical. Mashenkin him kivin kol hakavanas, as opposed to if he thought and had concentration on all the intentions and all the spiritual meanings of the mitzvah. But didn't actually do the mitzvah in action. Lo yotzi did not fulfill the obligation. So this is the question of the Ben Chacham. This is the question of the wise son. How do we draw it down through mitzvahs in action? The revelation of the infinite light of Hashem. So now he asks, especially through what it's known, he's going to raise the bar. It's even a higher thing. That we know that what's drawn down through the mitzvahs and action is not just the infinite light of Hashem, but it's Hashem's very essence. Chazal say, it is better, it's greater, 1 hour in tshuva and good deeds in this world from the entire life of the world to come. Now the question is, what does it mean when we say world to come? Now, this is a general question to Chazal, what they mean, and specifically, in this particular Maimer Chazal, what are we referring to the world to come? So he says, line 15, when it says the world to come, that has in it two meanings. Yesh mefarshim, those that explain that the world to come is going on the place where the neshamas are, the spiritual world of Gan Eden, that the neshamas exist and receive their reward after they leave this physical body after 120. Yesh mefarshim, there's those that explain that the world to come is referring to the world of the resurrection after Mashiach comes. Even according to that second explanation, and Torah mitzvahs is not just higher going on Gan Eden, but it's also higher than Olam Haba in the meaning of Mashiach's times, the Tchias HaMesim, the loss of Olam HaTchiyam, even from the revelations of the future time and the time of the Tchias HaMesim. The Dafka Diasis HaMitzvahs, Lamata Bagashus, Mamshichim Esa'atzmas, because only through performing mitzvahs down here below in the physical, we draw down Hashem's essence, and not just we draw it down, but we draw it down in the way of a dira that Hashem feels over here at home. And so in such a way that we make a home for Hashem down here below. That's why the general idea of the giving of the Torah was specifically down here below. The giving of the Torah could have been in one of two ways. Or the Yidden will go up above. Like it says, the Yidden could have been raised above the world. And over there, out of this world, the Torah could have been given to them. Or the other way around, Yidden will remain down here, and the Torah will descend below. Ulefoil, in actuality, all the B'Ritzonius Baruch it arose in his will. Matan Torah Yib Ba'ofen the Vayer Davayal Har Sinai, top of page. You test that Matan Torah should be in such a way that Hashem descended on Har Sinai. Shat Torah Nitn Lamata Begashmi is Dafka, that the Torah was given down here below in the physical. Behind this means Shakotze only in the utmost highest level. Ein Sof L'Mayla Mada the Ketz, the infinite light of Hashem that is above to no end. Nimshel Bekotza Tachten Dafka came down in the lowest extreme. This is the question of the wise son. He returns and he asks this every single year. What are these edus that Hashem commanded you? Your avodah isn't performing mitzvahs in the physical specifically. How is it possible that we should draw down from this highest, most level, even higher than Tchias HaMesim, through doing the mitzvahs in action? Ben Chacham reflects the Chachma of Kedusha from the perspective of the logic and rational reasoning of Kedusha. The fulfillment of mitzvah should have been the spiritual realm, like it was by the forefathers.